Okay, welcome back to math class. Yesterday we talked about equations that looked like this: x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. What's different about what we did yesterday and what we did today is that yesterday we were assuming that the leading coefficient, or the coefficient that's attached to our first term, was 1. But today we're going to talk about what happens if it's not 1. If we have an a there, if we have a different number besides 1. I think the best way for us to go about talking about this is for me to just show you guys an example. Okay, so if I have 5x squared plus 13x plus 6 equals 0, my first thing I'm going to do is, just like yesterday, I'm going to set up a table that's my factors and my sum. But whereas yesterday I was just doing the factors of c, which in this case would be 6, now that we have a coefficient here that's greater than 1, I'm going to do my factors of my c times my a. So I'm going to do 6 times 5, which in this case is 30. My a times c is 30, so I'm going to look for my factors of 30. That's the biggest difference in this compared to yesterday, is that instead of just doing the factors of c and the sum of b, I have to do the factors of c times a, but we're still using the sum of c, which in this case is 13. Okay, so my factors of 30, as I'm looking at it, I'm going to start at the beginning, 1 and 30, right? But it looks like 1 plus 30 is 31, so that's not it. Then I'm going to do 2 and 15. 2 plus 15 is 17, so that's not it. Next I'll try 3 and 10. 3 plus 10 is 13, which is what we're looking for, so looks like 3 and 10 is the way that we're going to go. So what I'm going to do, now that I've found that 3 and 10 is my factor of 30 that also adds up to 13, is I'm going to rewrite this equation as 5x squared plus 10x plus 3x, this is my 10 and my 3, plus 6 equals 0. Now I haven't changed the value of the equation. All I've done is taken 13 and split it into 10 plus 3. The reason I did this is because now I can factor this by grouping, like we learned a few days ago. So I'm going to group together my 5x squared and my 10x, because they have a common factor, and my 3x and my 6, because they have a common factor. And I'm going to factor by grouping just like we've already done in the past. So looking at 5x squared and 10x, the common factor that I can pull out of both of those is going to be 5x. When I take 5x out of 5x squared, all I'm going to have left is x. If I take 5x out of 10x, I'm going to get 2. Now I'm going to go plus 3, because 3 is the greatest common factor of these. And I'm going to go 3x divided by 3 is going to give me just x left over, and 6 divided by 3 is going to give me 2. Okay, now you'll notice that what we have inside of our parentheses on both terms is the same. So we're good to go ahead and use that backwards distributive property like we talked about, where we pull these together. 5x plus 3 times x plus 2 equals 0. So far so good. These are steps we've done in the past. We're just adding this to it. All right, now that we're here, we're going to use the zero product property like we talked about a couple days ago. And basically what that means, if you guys remember, is that if this times this equals 0, then either this equals 0 or this equals 0. one of them has to equal 0 in order for the whole thing to be 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my 5x plus 3 equals 0. So either 5x plus 3 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. One of those has to be true. So to solve this, I'm going to solve both of them. To solve 5x plus 3 equals 0, I'm going to undo what's happening to x, so I'm going to say minus 3. If I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side, so I'm going to say minus 3 over here. Positive 3 minus 3 equals 0, so those guys are going to cancel each other out. 0 minus 3 is going to give us negative 3. So now we have 5x equals negative 3. Now right now I have 5 times x, so I'm going to divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is just 1, so those cancel each other out. And I just have x over here. But if I do it to one side, I have to do it to the other side. So I'm going to do negative 3 divided by 5 also. So our x equals negative 3/5. Or x plus 2 equals 0. So I'm going to undo what's happening to x. I'm going to go minus 2. Positive 2 minus 2 equals 0, so those guys cancel each other out. If I do it to this side, I have to do it to this side. So I'm just going to be left with x equals 2. So our solution to this problem is either x equals negative 3/5 or x equals 2. Those are our two possible solutions to this problem. And that's where you finish. That's done. One last thing I want to mention before we stop is you may get started on one of these and realize that you've tried all of the factors of this number and none of them add up to be the sum of b. None of them add up to b. If that happens, don't freak out. It doesn't necessarily mean you did something wrong. Whenever there are no factors that add up to the sum, it means it can't be factored, and we're going to call that a prime polynomial. Prime polynomial. That means, basically we're just saying it can't be factored. That's all we're saying when we label it prime polynomial. So you may get started, you might try every single factor you can possibly think of and none of them add up to the sum of b. If that's the case, you just label it prime polynomial and you stop. You don't do any of the rest of this because you can't factor it. And factoring is what we're doing. You just label it prime polynomial and you stop.